We begin this episode by acknowledging the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the land where we gather to record and share these stories. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and recognise the deep cultural knowledge, connection and care that have guided this country across generations. We also extend that respect to any First Nations peoples listening or watching today's episode. As we journey beyond the veil, we do so with gratitude and respect, mindful of the footsteps that came before us and the stories held in this country. May we listen deeply, learn with humility, and move forward with integrity and heart. Welcome to Beyond the Veil Australia podcast, a space where stories, experiences, and the unexplained meet in ways that stay with us long after the moment has passed. I'm Heather, your guide through the shadows and the host of Beyond the Veil Australia podcast. Together, we'll explore the cases that stay with us, the ones with layers beneath the surface, threads waiting to be followed, and voices that deserve the time and attention to be understood. As this season unfolds, more voices join the journey, co-hosts and guests who carry their own pieces of the story through conversation, reflection, and careful attention to detail. We'll follow each case where it leads, uncovering the threads that shift our understanding of the unknown. These aren't just encounters, they're experiences that stay with us. And as we move through each story, we're paying attention to the shifts, the echoes, and the quiet truths that only come forward when you're willing to sit with them long enough. In Season 1, we lifted the veil. In Season 2, we stepped through. And this season, we descend. And now, the descent is open. So follow it where it leads, because the way forward runs down. Hello and welcome back to Beyond the Veil Australia podcast. I'm your host, Heather, and today's episode is, again, another interesting, not really well-known case that I was really curious to look into. It's not one that I actually have come across in any of my other episodes. So this one was one where I was out sort of looking at some of the lesser-known cases when I was doing some little research. And when I read a little bit about this, I thought, this is quite fascinating. I'd really like to explore it. So this is called the Drowned Homestead, and it's about a place in Victoria called Lake Eildon. It is a place I have been before, the town itself, not the Drowned Homestead. I have been to the area before, and again, having been there and now looking at this case, it's like, oh, okay, this is interesting. How have I not known about these things? Once again, welcome to the podcast. If you're new here, I hope that you enjoy this episode. If you're a returning listener or viewer, welcome back. I'm really pleased that you're back again and that you're enjoying the content that I've got for this season. And I hope that you've enjoyed the content that I've covered in Season 1 and 2 as well. So, again, doing a little bit of bulk recording before the baby comes. So at the time of recording this, I'm 35 weeks pregnant. So, you know, it could be any day now, really. So I obviously just wanted to make sure that I got in and got my episodes recorded and, you know, so I can spend a bit of time editing them. Hopefully, have a bit of time to edit them and get them all ready and out for you. So probably by the time you're listening to this episode, there probably is a baby that's around. And, we'll touch base on that probably on the social media pages. So if you're not already following along, you can follow Beyond the Veil Australia on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. If you're watching on YouTube, then naturally you've found us on YouTube. But if you're listening on an audio platform and you want to check out the video to this, then you are welcome to at our YouTube channel, which is at Beyond the Veil Australia. Every episode that I record with video and audio, so that there's a video for YouTube and audio only for every other platform. And if you like the content in any of the episodes, but even in this one, please leave a comment and let me know what you think. If it's, again, depending on what the episode is that you're listening to, if there's anything that resonates for you or you've got a story of your own, always happy to hear what other people's experiences have been. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. There are places in Australia where the past lies just beneath the surface. Not buried, not forgotten, but waiting. Waiting for the right drought, the right light, the right moment when the waterline drops low enough for memory to breathe again. Lake Eildon is one of those places. Most people see a holiday lake, a reservoir, a place for fishing and houseboats for summer afternoons. But if you stand at the shoreline at dusk, when the wind dies and the water turns the colour of tarnished brass, you may feel something else. A pressure, a presence, a sense that the surface is thin, because before this was a lake, it was actually a valley with orchards and fences and families. A valley with a river that behaved like a witness, and a homestead that should have disappeared when the water came up. But it didn't. In this episode, we're going to descend into that drowned world, into the history, the folklore, the hydrology, the psychology, and the haunting that has persisted for more than 70 years. We'll follow the story of the woman who lived in that house, the steps that still rise from the mud, and the sightings that continue to this day. This is a story about displacement, memory, and the strange ways that landscapes refuse to let go. A story about what happens when a place is drowned, and then what rises when the water falls away. This episode, we're going beneath the surface. The valley that wouldn't let go. Before there was a lake, there was a valley that behaved like a memory. The Upper Goulburn Valley, before the dam, wasn't just a strip of fertile land with a river running through it. It was a long, breathing corridor of water, fog, and sound. The Tungarung people had lived with the river for thousands of years, and their stories, water is never just water. It is a being that remembers. It's a boundary that moves. It is a witness. In some of those stories, the river shifts its course not randomly, but in response to imbalance. So, too much taking and not enough giving back. There are warnings about building too close, about ignoring the signs when the water rises in the wrong season, or when the mists come back in too thick and too quiet. The river, they say, can reclaim what was never truly ceded. By the time European settlers arrived in the mid-1800s, those warnings had already been spoken into the land. But the new arrivals didn't hear them. They saw a valley with rich soil, a reliable water source, and room to build. They brought surveyors, fences, and the idea that the land could be owned in straight lines. The homestead at the centre of this story began as a small, hopeful structure, a 2-room slab hut built by young people who believed the valley would give them a future. The river ran close enough that the sound of it was constant, a low, shifting presence at the edge of every day. Over time, the hut grew. Weatherboards replaced slabs, a veranda was added, a stone chimney rose at one end. A small orchard took root behind the house, apples, plums, a few stubborn pears that never quite thrived. And from the back of the house, a set of stone steps led down toward the river. They weren't grand, just practical. Uneven stones, hand-laid, worn smoothly by boots and bare feet, and the small, repetitive movements of daily life. Fetching water, washing clothes, cooling milk in the shallows, watching the river rise after rain. Those steps will become the spine of everything that follows. The family who lived there left behind more than just land titles. In regional archives, in acid-free boxes and digitised scans, there are diaries, letters, and account books that trace the slow, ordinary passage of life in the valley. They write about lambing seasons, broken fences, neighbours lost to accidents and illness. They write about droughts that cracked the soil and floods that turned the paddocks into temporary lakes. But threaded through those practical entries are moments that don't sit comfortably in the ledger of daily life. One entry from 1897 notes, "A strange light on the river last night. Too low to be a lantern, too steady to be a reflection." Another from 1911 mentions voices on the water after dark, a conversation carried on the current, though no one was there. In 1924, a daughter of the house writes about waking in the night and seeing a woman standing at the waterline, skirts wet, head tilted, as if listening to something beneath the surface. She doesn't call it a ghost. She doesn't call it anything. She just records it as plainly as she records the weather. The river in these pages is not a backdrop. It's a character. It rises and falls. It takes and gives. It appears in dreams. It shows up in metaphors when the writer is trying to describe grief or fear or the feeling of being watched. There are also gaps, months where no one writes anything at all. Those gaps often follow floods or deaths or seasons when the river broke its banks and took part of the orchard with it. When the writing resumes, there is sometimes a different tone, a heaviness, a sense that something has shifted, but no one wants to name it. If you stand on the shore of Lake Eildon now, it's hard to imagine that a valley as it was. But if you close your eyes and listen, you can almost hear it. The creak of the wind in the orchard trees, the clink of buckets on the stone, the low, constant murmur of the river. And somewhere in that landscape, the soft scuff of feet on stone steps going down towards the water. The valley was never empty. It was layered. Tungarong stories, settler diaries, unspoken grief, and the quiet, persistent presence of the river that did not forget. And when you drown a place like that, you don't just cover soil and timber, you cover memory. The drowning of a life, a landscape, and a story. By the 1940s, the valley's fate was being decided in rooms far away from its fog and its river. Victoria was expanding. The original Eildon Weir, built in the 1920s, had done its job for a while, storing water and generating power. But it wasn't enough anymore. Engineers and politicians began to talk about capacity, demand, future growth. On paper, the valley became a problem to be solved, a reservoir to be enlarged, a sacrifice zone. Maps were redrawn. Lines were drawn across the valley in blue pencil, marking the future high water line. Properties were assessed, valued, and listed for compulsory acquisition. In government files, the homesteads appeared as a parcel number, a set of coordinates, a figure in pounds and shillings. But in the valley, it was still a home. The woman who owned it by then appears in those same files under her full name, but in local memory she is almost always referred to as the widow on the river. Her husband had died in an accident years earlier. Her children had left, one to the city, one to a marriage further north. The farm was no longer profitable. The orchard was thinning, and the house needed repairs that she couldn't afford. But she stayed. Neighbours remembered her as reserved but not unfriendly. She attended church sometimes, but not regularly. She helped with births and illnesses. She was known to leave food quietly on doorsteps when someone was doing it tough. She rarely asked for help herself. What people remember most, though, is how often she was seen near the river. At dusk, she would walk to the boundary fence, checking posts and wire that are no longer really needed, and she would sit on the stone steps with a cup of tea, watching the water. In summer, she would stand barefoot in the shallows, skirts hitched, eyes closed, as if listening for something beneath the current. When the letters first arrived, informing landholders of the proposed expansion, some families began to plan their departure immediately. Others hoped that the project would be delayed, or even better, cancelled. The widow on the river did neither. She folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and went back to her routines. As the project moved from proposal to inevitability, the pressure increased. Officials visited properties. Surveyors hammered stakes into the ground. The language of the valley shifted from when the rains come to when the water comes up. People began to talk about their homes in the past tense, even while they were still living in them. The widow received her compulsory acquisition notice like everybody else. The amount offered was not generous, but it was final. She was given a date by which she had to leave. In the weeks leading up to that date, neighbours noticed a change. She became quieter, but also more present. She visited people she hadn't seen in years. She walked the boundary fence more slowly, as if memorising each post. She spent longer on the steps by the river, sometimes long after dark. A small, still figure against the moving water. There are several versions of what happened to her on her last day at the homestead. In one, she walks the property line at dawn, touching each corner post, then returns to the house, locks the door, and leaves the key under a stone on the steps. In another, she refuses to leave until the very last moment, standing in the doorway as the demolition crew arrives, her face unreadable. And in the version that persists, the one that comes up again and again when you talk to older locals, she is seen at dusk, sitting on the stone steps, her feet resting on the lowest one, the river lapping close. A neighbour, passing at a distance, calls out to her. She lifts a hand in acknowledgement but doesn't turn around. The neighbour keeps walking. When they look back, she's still there, a dark shape against the water. The next day she's gone. Her belongings have been removed. The house is empty. The homestead itself is never demolished. On paper, it is marked for inundation, not destruction. The logic is simple. Why waste resources tearing down what the water will cover? The expansion of Lake Eildon becomes one of the largest engineering projects in the state. Thousands of workers arrive. Temporary camps spring up. The valley fills with the sound of engines blasting, shouted instructions. The river is diverted. Concrete walls rise. The old flow of water is interrupted, redirected, and controlled. From a distance, it looks like progress. Up close, it looks like a drowning. As the water begins to rise, some families return to watch. They stand on the ridgelines and look down as the paddocks become shallows, as trees become islands, as houses become dark shapes beneath the surface. Some cry. Some are silent. Some turn away quickly, unable to watch the slow erasure of their former lives. No one knows exactly when the water reaches the homestead. There is no single moment when it disappears. It happens gradually. The river swells, the steps vanish one by one, the veranda goes under. The chimney is the last to go, a small, stubborn vertical line in a landscape that is becoming horizontal. On the day the water finally covers it, no one is there to see. In official reports, the valley is now Lake Eildon. Storage capacity is measured. Power generation is calculated. The project is declared a success. But beneath the surface, the valley is still there. The orchard, the fences, the roads, the house, and somewhere in that drowned geometry, the stone steps still lead toward the river that has now forced its own name. The return of the house and the woman who never left. Lakes like Eildon are often spoken about as if they are static, full or low, up or down. But in reality, they like to breathe. They inhale with the rain and snowmelt. They exhale with the drought and demand. And every time Lake Eildon exhales, the past rises a little closer to the surface. The first documented reappearance of the homestead comes in 1967, during a period of low rainfall. The lake has dropped enough that old fence posts and tree stumps are visible along the receding shoreline. Locals are used to this. Eildon has always been a place where the skeleton of the old valley occasionally shows through. But this time, something else appears. A group of fishermen out on a tinny late in the afternoon notice a shape beneath the water. At first, they think it's just another submerged tree, but as they drift closer, the outline sharpens. It looks like a roofline, a rectangular form, angles that don't belong to geology. They describe the water above it as unnaturally still, even though there's a breeze. One of them leans over to the side, peering down. He sees what looks like the top of a chimney, pale against the darker silt. He feels a sudden, inexplicable sense of being watched. They leave pretty quickly. When they report it to a ranger the next day, he is skeptical but curious. He goes out alone, following their directions. The lake is even lower now. The top of the chimney is no longer just a pale blur. It breaks the surface. A small, rough column of stone. He notes in his log. He also notes something else, but not in writing. As he sits in the boat, engine off, the water around him goes quiet. Not just calm, quiet. The usual slap of small waves against the hull stops. The distant sounds of other boats seem to recede. In that silence, he hears something. a voice. Not clear words, not a shout, just a low, rhythmic sound like someone humming to themselves while they work. It seems to come from the direction of the chimney or from beneath it. He starts the engine and leaves. In his official report, he mentions the chimney and the low water level. He does not mention the voice. Over the next few decades, the pattern repeats. Whenever the lake drops significantly, during the dry years of the 1980s, the early 2000s, and especially during the millennium drought, the drowned valley begins to show itself. Old roads appear as pale scars in the mud. Fence lines re-emerge. The remains of other structures, sheds, cottages, outbuildings become visible. But the homestead is different. It doesn't just appear as rubble. It appears as a shape, a footprint, a memory of architecture. The chimney stands. The foundation stones form a clear rectangle. The orchard reasserts itself in crooked rows of stunted, leafless trunks. And the stone steps rise from the mud, intact, leading down toward a place that no longer exists. People who see it describe a feeling that is hard to articulate, not just nostalgia or sadness, but a sense of intrusion, as if they have walked into a room where someone is still present, even if they can't see them. And then there are the sightings. A camper, waking early to use the toilet, looks down toward the exposed shoreline and sees a woman standing on the steps. The light is grey, the kind of pre-dawn that makes everything look slightly unreal. The woman is facing the water, her back to the camper. Her dress is long, dark, and appears wet at the hem. Her hair is pulled back, and she is completely still. The camper assumes she is another visitor, perhaps out for an early walk. They look away for a moment, distracted by a noise behind them. But when they look back, the woman is gone. The steps are empty. There are no footprints in the mud. A kayaker paddling over the area when the water is low but not fully receded feels the temperature change beneath him. The lake has been cold all morning, but suddenly, in one patch, the water feels warm, almost bath-like. He stares down and sees, through the greenish haze, the outline of a roof. As he drifts, he feels a sensation passing over a threshold. He later describes it as like going from outside to inside, but without walls. A teenage girl camping with friends wakes in the middle of the night to the sound of someone walking past their tent. She hears the soft, deliberate crunch of the footsteps on dry ground. Thinking it's one of her friends, she unzips the tent and looks out. Down near the waterline, she sees a woman standing on the steps, her dress drooping, her hair plastered to her face as if she has just come out of the lake. The woman's head is tilted slightly, as if listening. The girl blinks, and the woman is gone. The steps are bare, but the ground between the water and the steps is marked with wet footprints that fade before her eyes. A ranger, years after the first 1967 encounter, is patrolling the shoreline during another low water period. He has heard the stories. He doesn't believe them, but he doesn't mock them either. As he walks, he sees the steps ahead of him, rising from the mud. On the third step from the top, a figure stands. A woman, still, facing the water. He stops and calls out. There's no response. He takes a few steps closer. The air feels thick, as if he has walked into a room where the windows are closed. He blinks, and in that blink, the figure is gone. Not walked away, gone, like a reflection broken by a ripple. He turns around and walks back the way he came. He never patrols that section alone again. Hydrologists studying Lake Eildon have noticed something else. In the areas where submerged structures remain intact, the water behaves differently. It warms faster in the sun, it cools more slowly at night. It forms pockets of stillness, even when the rest of the lake is choppy. Instruments lowered into these zones sometimes record odd fluctuations, small, localized anomalies in temperature and sound. Folklorists have a term for places like this: memory pools. Locations where water seems to remember the shape of what lies beneath it and behaves as if those shapes still matter. In Wales, in the drowned village of Capel Selan, I hope I've said that right, people speak of hearing church bells ringing from beneath the reservoir on certain nights. In Japan, fishermen on dam lakes report warm currents above submerged shrines and lights that move in patterns that don't match any known boat or reflection. In the southern parts of America, divers explore drowned towns and talk about pockets of silence, where these sounds seem to be swallowed and where they feel watched, even when they're not alone. Lake Eildon fits into that global pattern with the unsettling precision. A valley taken, a house drowned, a woman who did not want to leave, a structure that resurfaces only when the lake exhales, and a set of stone steps that seem to function as kind of a hinge, like between land and water, past and present, and the presence and absence. The theory, the haunting, and the story that refuses to end. At a certain point in a case like this, you have to ask, what exactly is haunting this place? Is it a person, a house, a landscape, a decision? On the surface, the story of the drowned homestead beneath Lake Eildon looks like a classic ghost narrative. A widow attached to her home, forced to leave her house, and her house has been drowned. Therefore, her presence is still lingering. The sightings of a woman on the steps fit that pattern neatly. So do the voices, the humming, and the sense of being watched. But when you look more closely, the haunting seems to be doing something more complex. The woman is always seen in relation to the steps and the water. She's not wandering the campsite. She's not appearing in people's tents. And she's not knocking on caravan doors. She is always at the threshold, where the house once met the river, where the land now meets the lake. In folklore, thresholds are powerful. Doorways, gates, bridges, shorelines. These are places where categories blur, neither fully one thing nor the other. In many traditions, spirits are said to linger at thresholds because they are the easiest places to cross between states. The stone steps of the homestead are a literal threshold. They once led from solidity of the house down to the shifting edge of the river. Now they rise from mud toward a surface that hides an entire drowned world. If you think of the haunting as centered on the widow alone, you get one kind of story. A woman who loved her home so much she refused to leave it. even in death. But if you widen the frame, another possibility emerges. What if the haunting is not just about her? What if it is about the act of drowning a place that was already full of memory? Psychologists who study communities displaced by dam projects talk about submerged grief, a form of collective mourning that never fully resolves because the loss is both permanent and invisible. The town is gone, but not really gone. The house is gone, but not really gone. You can't visit a grave. You can't walk the old streets. You can only stand at the edge of the water and imagine what actually lies beneath. That kind of grief has nowhere to go. It lingers. It attaches itself to stories, to rumours, to sightings. It becomes part of the way people talk about the place. Folklorists looking at drowned towns across the world notice reoccurring motifs. Bells heard from beneath the water, lights moving in patterns that suggest streets, figures seen walking where roads once ran. These are not random. They are the imagination's way of insisting that what was taken is actually still there in some form. Mythologists go further. They talk about the persistence of place, the idea that landscapes hold memory, and that when landscapes are violently altered, something in them resists. In this view, a haunting is not just a ghost. It's the land itself pushing back against erasure. So, what is Lake Eildon doing? Well, on one level, it's functioning exactly as designed, storing water, generating power, supporting recreation. On another level, it's behaving like an archive. It has preserved the valley beneath it, so its roads, its fences, its houses, and in a kind of suspended state. And every time that water drops, it opens the archive a little. The homestead reappears. The steps rise. The orchard shows its bones. People see a woman on the threshold. They hear humming and they feel watched. You could say that the widow is haunting the lake. You could also say that the lake is haunting us with her. Because every sighting, every story, every photograph of those steps at dusk forces us to remember what lies beneath the surface, not just physically, but ethically. The drowned homestead beneath Lake Eildon is not just a ruin. It is a reminder of a decision to flood a valley, to displace families, to submerge a landscape that had its own long history of stories and agreements. The haunting, then, might be doing several things at once. It might be the widow, still attached to the threshold where she spent so many evenings listening to the river. It might be the collective grief of a community that watched its homes disappear underwater. Or it might be the land itself, refusing to let the story end at the shoreline. Or it might actually be all of these stories layered together like silt. When people stand at the edge of Lake Eildon now, most of them see a holiday destination. Boats, jet skis, fishing rods, kids on inflatable rings. But some, especially at dusk, feel something else. A pressure. A sense that the surface is thin. They look out across the water and imagine the valley as it was. The orchard, the fences, the house with its veranda and its stone chimney. They imagine the widow on the steps watching the river, refusing to let go. And if the water is low enough, they might see the steps themselves rising from the mud, leading down toward a place that no longer exists. The woman on the steps, the lights beneath the surface, the pockets of warm, still water above the drowned house, the voices carried on the lake at night. They're not just spooky details, they're signals. Signals that some places don't stay drowned. Signals that some stories refuse to end just because we've decided to stop looking. Lake Eildon keeps what it was given. And every so often, when the level drops and the light is right, it gives a little back. Not as a neat, resolved narrative, but as a haunting. A woman at a threshold, a house that returns in pieces, a valley that will not let go of its own memory. And the question that lingers long after you've left the shoreline: what else lies beneath the surface that we've learnt to accept as normal? When you stand at the edge of Lake Eildon now, it's easy to forget what lies beneath. The boats, the laughter, the bright, ordinary noise of a place that has been rebranded as recreation. And what we've explored isn't just a haunting, it's a reminder that landscapes hold memory, that displacement leaves marks, that water doesn't erase, it preserves. And that some stories refuse to end simply because we've decided to stop looking. They're not just fragments of a ghost story, they're signals. From a valley that was never ready to be drowned, from a life that was never ready to be erased, from a landscape that still remembers the shape of what it once held. And maybe that is the real haunting here. Not so much the figure on the steps, and not the humming beneath the water, but the knowledge that beneath every calm surface there are stories we've covered over, stories that rise when the world grows quiet enough to hear them. That was a really fascinating story, and I didn't really want to interrupt too much because I found it was quite fascinating being able to kind of really pick up a lot more of that rich history in it rather than just the haunting. But what I found interesting is that there are several like several stories that no one's really sure of what actually happened to this woman. But for me, when I was putting this together, and even as I was reading through it, what I felt was that she stayed when the river water was let through. That was what I felt. I don't know enough about the specifics of her story per se. But I just got the feeling that the first option, which is sort of where she just refused to leave and just went inside and stayed there, that was the one that I felt the strongest vibe from, that she just went peacefully in her own space. I hope it was peacefully anyway, because it sort of gives me Titanic vibes. I don't know. She may have actually left that home, but that was that particular angle where she just stayed in her space and just let the water come through is what felt the strongest for me. Purely because when there was stories around that day or so before everybody was technically supposed to leave, that she'd done things that were a little bit out of the ordinary for her, and not so much out of the ordinary completely, but, you know, making that effort to see neighbours and to take in the property as it was, and, you know, to engage a little bit more with the community. For me, I think that means that it was an active choice for her to go in the way she wanted to. So I don't know what, I'm not sure. That's just the vibe I've got from that. I know what we've explored has been more history rich about sort of what was happening, but I definitely think that the land definitely holds memory. And even with the First Nations people, the Tungarung people, we talked about at the start, where it's about give and take, and if you care for the land and you look after it, then it will look after you. And if you take too much or not give back or whatever that was, that was when they noticed there was differences in when the lake or river would actually respond and be like, whoa, hang on, you've taken too much there and not given it back or whatever. So it's like that natural flow of karma. And I definitely think that the land has the ability to sort of keep score. So, yeah, it's interesting. That one's a really interesting story. And it's one that, again, it's probably really not that well known. I mean, some of these experiences that we looked at as well, they've documented a certain part of it, but not all of it. And it's not come out until people have actually said, oh, well, I was camping and I heard someone outside. And naturally I would think, oh my God, there's like a Bigfoot outside the tent, like in the camping stories anyway. But it's really fascinating that she's always on the shoreline. Her back is always to the people that see her, and she's wet, So to me, that then gives a little bit more weight to what I felt was the way that she passed away, which was that she stayed in her home as the waters came through. So I don't know. It's giving also a little bit like stone tape theory as well, where it's like, buildings can hold things as well. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's like we talked about before. It's like maybe it is all of these different things. Maybe it's not just one specific type of haunting. I think sometimes we forget just how intersectional everything is. And I know I've said that in other episodes where the paranormal can be so intersectional with different elements of the paranormal, but it can be so intersectional with different elements of life, if that makes sense. Like we're talking about the land or different types of things like that. It's just it's fascinating because it's not a really well-known kind of case, and just the subtlety of the way it presents. Like you look at some other cases that we've covered and it's quite full on. So to sort of come to this one and be like, oh, it's more subtle. It's a little bit less overbearing. I think it gives you the opportunity to really kind of sit and think about it a little bit and ponder what you think it is. But again, I just want to say a massive shout out. Thank you to everybody that's watching or listening. I, of course, always truly appreciate everybody's support. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky with managing the socials a little bit with busyness of family and at the time of recording being pregnant, but probably at the time that this is released, there may be a baby around. So I will, of course, definitely try and jump on where I can and check in with everyone. But yeah, thank you all again for joining me. I hope that you've enjoyed today's episode, and I hope that you've enjoyed other episodes that have come out as well, and that it's keeping you satisfied in the paranormal podcasting world, because I know sometimes it can get a bit tricky to sort of know what to do next. So again, until next time, stay grounded, stay curious, and of course, always expect the unexpected. And remember, some places don't just stay drowned, they re-emerge. That's all from me. Bye for now.